Okay, we're to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff Tip. A really cool review for you guys from the brand Nodus. A little about them. They were founded back in 2017 out of Long Beach, California in LA County. And Nodus is Latin for node, the intersection of two paths where quality meets affordability, where heritage meets modernity, and where design meets functionality, in, of course, the brand's own words. Now, in my own words, I just, would describe them as a modern micro brand, fan favorite, offering high quality, high value wristwatches that are designed, assembled, and regulated in the US. And they even offer a 2-year, 24-month warranty. Now, this is actually a dual collaboration, so you're going to see it double branded down below above the 6. You're going to have the Raven logo. A little about them. They were founded back in 2008. They're headquartered out of the US in Kansas, and they're a micro brand really known for vintage style homages with modern upgrades, now moving towards more unique original designs. In terms of the type of watch, this also has a bit of a dual purpose as well. It falls under that kind of everyday outdoor adventure watch category, being sporty, legible, and tough, and of course also ultimately capable. And it also falls within that traveler space with that GMT functionality, so you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is the TrailTrekker, and this project debuts a brand new watch platform utilizing the Miyota 9075 GMT movement with an independently adjustable hour hand, a gunmetal gray DLC covers the entire watch for scratch resistance and rugged aesthetic, while the bezel and dial are highly protected with a Cerakote, a really nice hard ceramic coating used in the military, aerospace, and automotive applications. It also features a 3D chamfered gunmetal handset and indices to round out the package, and you even get a nicely capped hand stack there, as you guys will notice. Very luxurious. You can get these for $875 direct. The first batch has already sold out, where pre-orders are open for August 2024 shipping currently. So with that long intro out of the way, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, let's just jump right in. Let's get something out of the way. I'm not a coating guy, and I have to say, the coating makes this watch. Like, as cool as the watch is, I thought one of my first thoughts would be, imagine it without the coating. But I have to say the coating adds such a cool factor here. I'm really, really intrigued by it. I mean, the finish, it's just done to such a high level. It makes the watch. Some of you are probably wondering, well, why didn't you just do a full DLC? Like, why didn't you do the bezel? Well, it's because that bezel is technically 2 different colors, right? So you're going to have that black index for the 24-hour scale, and to make sure that adhesion would work, the Cerakote worked much better for that application. And of course, this is a very tough Cerakote. And then also you're able to get that to match perfectly with the dial, which I think is great. And it matches very, very closely, of course, depending on the lighting situation, to the rest of the watch, which I know it's sold as a gray, but I mean, to me, there's distinct tones, of warm tones, bronzy tones that give this more of a greenish, very dark green hue. Not quite an olive or anything like that, but yeah, to me, this is a dark green, and man, does it render beautifully. And I have to say, it reminds me of a much more expensive watch because, again, I'm not a huge coated watch guy, but man, my G-Shock Virtual Armor, similar in terms of that coating, to where there's something about it, the way that it feels to the touch, the way that it's executed, just how close you can get into those details. It looks fantastic, guys. There's something about that where it's just, woo. Yeah, it's beautiful to touch. Of course, it's titanium. I think this in a titanium would sell like hotcakes. Maybe a future iteration, guys. But yeah, that did kind of remind me of that, where this watch really won me over with that coating, because I'm not big on that type of coating. But man, this coating, again, I mean, of course, I'm sure they'll eventually come out with a satin brushed one. I'm going to want that too. But there's something that's very, very special about it. And it just makes it kind of in a class of its own because of how different it is, which I can appreciate, especially considering aesthetically it's borrowing from, quite a few different models, right? I mean, some of you are thinking, oh, well, just because it has a 24-hour bezel, that means it's an Explorer 2 model. Like, it's not that at all. That's really the only thing that it shares with it, is that it has a 24-hour fixed bezel. I mean, that's it, right? This shares is probably actually more with my Grand Seiko GMT, which has a fixed steel bezel and a similar handset than it does with an Explorer 2. And then when you look at the case, guys, look at this. Look at this beautiful roll over here. Oh man, it almost reminds you a little bit of like a Speedmaster or a Seamaster, right? Like it's very cool, but it's not that, right? Because then you look at this undercut, it's different. You look at the side profile, it's different. It doesn't come out flat and then just, sharply come down. It has those beautiful flowing details. And then of course you have signature knurled crown, which some of you are going to go, oh, that looks familiar. Contrail series. Yes, this is actually, although this isn't a Contrail watch, it's debuting the Contrail platform, which is going to be released later this year as well. So if you're liking this, but you're thinking, man, I wish it had a rotating bezel, hey, you got good things coming your way. I've actually had a sneak preview of those if you look through my my channel history and everything. But enough of that. There's so many things to like about this watch, but let's get into some of the details here. So 39.5 millimeters in diameter, which is a great size, and again, great proportions with the dial to bezel ratios and all that. 11.8 millimeters thick, which is great, especially considering that this is a GMT watch. So you're going to have additional height for the hand stack, right? So the fact that it's still quite thin with an extra hand stack to where you can get another hand in there, again, shows the level of thoughtfulness in terms of the way that this is all laid out. Also, look at that beautiful sloped, it's mirrored there, right? So you get a little bit here, a little bump there, and then of course a little bump off of the crystal, which is a nice box dome sapphire, and it does have an inner AR coating, so it's going to be rendering quite nice. You can see even a nice little chaptering that's playing in there that has a dual colorway, so you're going to have the darker colorway for the evening hours, lighter colorway for the daylight hours, right? From essentially 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 1800 if you're used to reading on a 24-hour scale or military time. So inside, although you can't see it because it does have this really cool decorative case back, which I think is a nice nod, of course, to those frontiering, adventurous, and American roots overall. I mean, these are two American based companies, so I don't know, I think that's a nice touch. And it's actually, thanks to the coating here, it has this really cool kind of aged coin like finish, which I think is cool, guys. So although you can't see the movement inside, it has a Miyota 9075, which is their flyer movement. It has a 42-hour power reserve, beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate. And these are even regulated in 4 positions to plus or minus 8 seconds per day. And here's the kicker in terms of the feature set here. Since it is a Traveler or a Flyers GMT or a true GMT, depending on how angry you want to make the internet, look at that. You can jump the hour hand to wherever you are locally. And the great thing is you leave that GMT hand here set to your at home time, and you'll always know where you're at. And then even if you just, I'm going to visit Texas, visit New York, boom. And then you get back to California, there you go. So very, very useful, especially in things like, let's say, daylight savings. You just had to click it over one time, and that's fantastic. So really wonderful from that perspective. Now getting into some other details here, guys. You do have this very nice, check that out, this bracelet. It's just beautifully done. You got the bevels, 20 millimeters. You're getting also quick release spring bars. They're a little bit, in terms of the execution, good enough, but it's an option. I do appreciate when brands will kind of take the nubs and turn them more into something that just feels a little less mass produced, feels more like switches or triggers. But these are, you know, the more basic style where it's just going to have kind of a little pinhead that comes out. You can squish them with your fingers and you can remove this. The nice thing is you also do have drilled lugs. And yeah, it's going to be quite versatile. It even comes with a really cool strap. But I'm just so obsessed with this bracelet. I'm just going to focus on that. Now, in terms of the dial, there's a lot of fantastic things to enjoy here. You're getting the matte Cerakote dial with applied indices there, very nicely done. Finely beveled hands, loomed, definitely reminiscent of my Grand Seiko SBGM 245. And then they even have the capped hand stack, which is great. You do have, of course, that GMT hand, which does have that little chop on it, which visually does tie into, you know, let's say the ends of, you know, the hands, how there's a little bit of a flat portion. I think that is going to be, you kind of love it or maybe like it. I don't know if anyone's really going to hate that execution. I think they could have done, you know, of course, an arrow tip very easily, just changing the shape of it. And I think that probably would have been a little bit more vanilla, more safe. But you can see here, again, it's reflective of, let's say, that seconds hand detail, which is going to have a flat tip. It kind of reminds me of a shovel, right? You think about your gear and your military layout, in your loadout, you know, you're going to have typically a little, you know, a little foldable shovel, an e-tool with you or something like that. So I don't know, it's nice little callback to stuff like that. The dial, very, very nice, you know, kind of snowflake style, but at the 3 and then the 9, you're going to have just a bit of a different shape, which all still flows together. It doesn't look different just for the sake of being different, but it also does help with separating and giving you a little bit more of an original punch. So really, really nice. Guys, 20 atmospheres or 200 meters of water resistance, which again, at this thinness, at this layout, just all the feature sets there, that is very, very cool. And then of course you got this, the Nodus clasp. So really beautifully coated. You guys know, we've covered this quite a few times. I think it's really smart what they've done here, in terms of, you know, kind of taking an overall folded, you know, construction and make it feel quite nice. Twin triggers there. And then also you have this push button extension. So I do wish that, of course, the extension didn't show outside of the clasp. Like if the clasp was just a couple millimeters longer, you know, especially considering the folding section comes out anyway. Like if it met there, then you wouldn't see this part out. But I will say, if you're using it as an extension, truly, and not just as a micro adjust to try to dial in your fit, right? Let's say you dial in your fit, you're good. This fits perfectly for you. That's great. And then if you know, for me, I think to dial it in, I wear it about here. But then let's say it gets hot. Yeah, it extends. You're not going to be worried about the sightliness on a hot day. You're going to be worried more about your watch being comfortable. So I think it's forgivable, especially at the price point. But I would definitely love to see future iterations where they just extend that a little bit. And I know some people are like, oh, I don't want a longer clasp, this and that. But would you really know the difference? Because it's not like the clasp is extraordinarily long. And of course, when you hold the watch like this, it's already going to be flattened out by that folding section. So again, if they just extended that just a hair, I think it'd be fine. And I don't think the clasp would render or read as overly long. I think it would just be quite proportional, and I think it would be pretty perfect. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, I think this wears really well. Of course, at 7.5 inches, it is on the slightly larger side of average, but you can see that's also quite round. So it's not like it's this flat, wide wrist that just accommodates to every watch that's out there. I still have to be very selective and self-conscious, of course, about lug to lug, case proportions, and how everything kind of flows. But if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to be getting a decent amount of perspective distortion. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame here, so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And you know what, let me give it a quick little wipe here. There we go. Check that out. Ooh, that is a looker, guys. Look at the way it lays. Look at the way that the visual weight is broken down beautifully with the way that the light is catching that mid case. It just really accentuates the thinness and the organic flow of the way that it wraps beautifully around the wrist there, guys. So definitely, you know, it's a great size, but it also wears the size well, which I can appreciate. And you know, as I'm wearing this, I feel like, it's a little bit, I don't know. I actually wore this on a hike the other day, and one of the great things is I was able to pop the watch off. I was able to hit the little button here, give it another click. With that extra click, I was able to put it back on, and it gave me just that little bit of extra breathing space to where it didn't feel like it was hugging my wrist too tight. So very, very cool. And again, very, very functional. So sometimes, you know, I have to try to remember that, right? Is that not every watch is just here to be examined on a tabletop. They're meant to be worn, and they have a certain use case, and everything makes sense based off of those use cases, right? So as much as we want to, you know, be armchair quarterbacks and critique watches and say, oh, I would love it if this was different, that was different. Yeah, you know, ultimately there's so much purpose and design behind everything that you're going to see in the, you know, out in the metal, that, yeah, sometimes you just have to take those things into consideration and just, yeah, remember that this is meant to be out there. So for as much as I'd love to say, I'm more of a steel guy, right? I'm more of a brushed satin kind of guy. I have to say, this out in it doing its intended purpose, right? Out in the, out on a trail, out in a field type of, you know, situation. This is beautiful. It's not highly reflective. It's not going to give away your position, right? This just, there's something that is very, very cool about this. The X factor here is just through the roof. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, look at that loom. Fantastic. Just gorgeous, guys. But one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. Sometimes you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath the overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see beautifully, just beautifully functional there in the legibility. Very nice. And you're going to get a lot of play again. So if you're thinking, I don't wear a lot of green, guys, this thing's going to change. It's going to appear brown. It's going to appear gray. It's going to appear deep bronze. It's just going to be what you need it to be. I mean, this is as good as a black coated watch, but you're ultimately going to be getting a lot more visual interest and play in the warmth. And I think it just makes sense. Look at that. Man, very, very cool. Woo! That thing is, yeah. It's just, again, it's the X factor. It's hard for me to explain. I need to stop trying to explain, because then I'm just going to make this video so long, guys. So closing thoughts on the wrist, perfectly balanced, great thin wear with very handsome proportions. Model variations, none yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they do come out with, because this thing is awesome. Comparable models, while many brands have been focusing on turning bezel GMTs, it's definitely refreshing to see, you know, a solid fixed bezel option being thrown into the mix here. I dig that a whole lot. And at this angle, you can really see that really cool chapter ring again with that kind of day-night indicator layout, which is very cool. So for me, guys, bottom line, this collab piece feels truly special. You know, there's a charm that's hard to define, but really easy to appreciate. And I just love that. So I'm digging this a whole lot. One thing I do want to mention, because I'm sure I will get a thought or a comment on it, is, okay, the durability of the finish. And for me, especially when it comes to something that does have an extra layer of finishing on it, I think this finish is going to look awesome if you can hurt it. If you are able to wear it enough to damage it, I think it's going to look good. I mean, think Boba Fett, right? Boba Fett, his gear, his helmet, man, that looks really cool, right? And that was one of the reasons where I kind of came around on this G-Shock virtual armor was, yeah, I started thinking about Gundams, right? And it was just like, yes, a pristine, super clean one looks great. This looks great. But one that's worn out, that has rough around the edges, that has a little exposed metal, I think might look even cooler. So I'm really looking forward. Unfortunately, this isn't my piece personally. This is just a loaner that's going to be traveling around and on to the next review over here pretty soon. But I'm I'm definitely going to be following the hashtags around this watch so that I can see how people are able to break these in, wear them in, and I think ultimately over the next couple of years we're going to start seeing some really, really cool worn in trail trekkers, and I'm excited about it. So yeah, for me, that's when it is. Like, I don't want something that has to be perfect forever. I mean, if it has the ability, if it's strong enough to be perfect forever, great. But in the odd case that you can put it to its limits, I mean, isn't it cool that it's going to look nice? And like, if you can get a little scratch here and there and wear things down over time, like if it can take on the patina well and wear it well, wear its age well, tell a story in its finish, then I think that's a beautiful thing. So let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.